I've always been interested in thinking about new ways of understanding old problems. And one of the oldest problems in the world of policymaking is the gap between policy and practice, i.e. whenever a particular set of goals is put into place by a state agency or legislatively or by an institutional leader, that oftentimes the realization of those policy goals gets lost in what we often refer to as implementation challenges, which is the people that are actually responsible for enacting those policies have different understandings about what they mean and how they fit within their particular roles within institutions. And so the reason that complexity science applies to higher education in this context is that is a perennial concern in our education systems as well, is that people pass policies and expect for administrators and teachers to sort of implement those policies with absolute fidelity to the goals that were initially established. But the reality is that rarely happens, that those policies get adapted to local contexts that oftentimes are not exactly what was intended whenever they were passed. And the thing that's interesting to me is why that happens and how leaders can affect how that happens. Complex systems theory, or complexity science, first began and emerged from the work of natural science to try to develop models for understanding things like weather systems, right? Which are highly complex systems. A hurricane doesn't just form by a single cloud deciding that it wants to get really big and powerful one day. Instead, it's the interaction of multiple types of weather systems with one another. And complexity science is really the application of the language of mathematics to try to model and explain how smaller systems can work together interdependently to create larger systems. Based on the principles that we know about how systems work and change over time in the natural world, we can apply those same principles to the systems that we work in the human world, because the institutions that we've created are not disconnected from one another. Our schools are affected by our economy, by our communities, by the culture that surrounds them. And they're also not disconnected from the policies that come out of legislatures and state agencies to try to move those schools towards particular goals. And so complexity science provides a way for understanding education systems that allow us to see the interdependency between those systems, how the agents within them are connected to one another, and how they negotiate the pressures from both outside forces like the economy and from state policymaking, as well as the internal pressures from the students and the teachers and their roles in those systems to constantly adapt and evolve and change over time. And there's a really fascinating literature base that actually applies complexity science to leadership theory, provides guidance and sort of theoretical frameworks for leaders to think about their particular roles in leading complex systems. Some of the lessons from complexity science can provide, I think, powerful ways for thinking about how to negotiate those day-to-day challenges.